All right, so we are back for another Monday Mindset Moment. This is streaming live on Facebook into our Raising Our Resilience Facebook group. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can head on over to Raising Our Resilience Parent Group on Facebook and find us. Also, a link in the show notes, in this video's notes. So we're going to be going through some really important questions that new members have asked. That's what this Ask Me Anything format's all about. And I'll be dropping them into the chat as we go. Kirsten's asking where she can see them. They're too big to paste into the chat, but you can look at your email and you should have our regular newsletter list email that has all the questions. So let's get started. So we're here for it. We're here for this query of how do we raise resilient kids in challenging times? How do we help our kids set up our kids for success? What does it look like to be a resilient parent raising resilient kids? We have several people tuning in here in the group. Say hello in the comments if you would, so we can see who's here. And our first question is for Kerri Spring. We're going to go somewhat in an age progression, but not strictly. So if you have a question you'd like answered, definitely feel free to drop it into the Facebook comments or into the Zoom chat, and we'll get to your question today too. But we do have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get going. First question, excuse me. What are some good strategies for managing the age gap between my 15-month-old and my 6.5-year-old? So I have actually right now several clients with siblings who have a significant age gap of at least 5 years or so. She says, my husband and I both work full time and need help organizing the hustle and bustle of it all. Well, the first thing you need to do is really get familiar with the kind of ages and stages. And what you need to see is like, what is the developmental goal of each age and stage? It's something we go over in our graduation calls, actually, as we're kind of looking ahead in my program about what ages and stages are our kids heading into next. So if you're a client, you'll get the full training on this coming up soon. But what I can say about it now is that, you can see a stark contrast of like their goal of a 15-month-old and a 6.5-year-old and their like cognitive ability. And I can tell you just a little bit about those two stages, and that might help us to bridge together the age gap. So the 15-month-old is still discovering a lot of things about the physical properties of the world. So they're doing a lot of experimenting with their senses. They're experiencing things like gravity, flavors, textures, colors, and they're wanting to kind of see and feel their way and move their way through the world. And so you're always going to want to be appealing to their senses and wanting to be as concrete as possible when you speak to them. Make sure you're also showing them. With 15-month-old, they're incredibly sensitive to, your movements, changes of your voice, inflections, if you want to get their attention. They're also very sensitive to their like how bright the lights are and whether there's something texturally interesting. I mean, if you think about it, I was even thinking about this morning, I was like, towels are amazing if you're 15 months. You might get lost in the texture of a towel. Whereas a 6.5-year-old has seen towels for now, quite a while and is not going to be so fascinated with it. So knowing that 15-month-olds are also, their attention is switching more frequently than a 6.5-year-old might be able to stick with something for, up to a minute, even beyond, maybe even up to 20, 30 minutes is usually a pretty good threshold for 6.5-year-olds of like the high end. So how much supervision do they require? 15-month is going to need more of you. And what I can help you understand for your 6.5-year-old is that they are starting to become interested in like the way that your little society is organized. They'd love to weigh in on how they'd love to kind of see behind the curtain of how you're making decisions, of what is influencing those decisions, and they want to really know where they have influence. So building in choices, yes, like always with a toddler, but a 6.5-year-old, you're going to kind of level it up a little bit. So instead of saying, would you like to have cereal or eggs for breakfast? You could say, hey, we're cooking eggs. Do you want to whip the eggs, or do you want to help? Do you want to add in the cheese, right? So it's like, we're already doing this and you have more refinement of how it's going to go. And then you might even go beyond that and say like, what would make a great breakfast? Like, what do we need to have a great breakfast? Great breakfast is way too abstract for a toddler or 15-month-old, which is like just shifting into toddlerhood. So you're going to want to be kind of having two conversations. We're like, oh, sweetie, look, it's your book at the table. And that's the 15-month-old. And the 6.5-year-old, you might ask this bigger question, like, what would make a good breakfast this morning? And you're almost like wearing two hats as you switch back and forth. And then you can also help the 6.5-year-old see the difference. So I would be playing into, notice what happens when I show your brother or your sister or your sibling what to do instead of just telling them. And do a demo. It's like, put your pants on, or let's put your foot in each pant leg, and like show it and help and everything. Sometimes a 6.5-year-old can get really interested in being that older sibling helper. And I would start with things that they already have quite a bit of mastery in, and let them know what you see, how you see them as a big, their big sibling, and like how it could even be silly and fun and meaningful to help out. So those are some bridges there. In terms of scheduling and things like that, it's really difficult to work full time and have a child under 2 years old. Like, we've all been there. Those of us who started with our children at a young age. And it's sort of all hands on deck when you're in the presence of a child under 2. It's really rare that they're fully self-entertained safely for longer than 5 minutes. And so you have a lot on your plate. This is really happening. I mean, maybe you don't need me to tell you, but what I could say is, the more that you can do, like, kind of create these foundational pieces, like really clear routines that everybody knows what's going on with them, especially you and your husband and your 6.5-year-old, and you just like, kind of got that going in a steady rhythm. If that isn't in place, let's talk soon. And I know, Kerri, you haven't signed up for a session before, so you can have a 30-minute complimentary session with me if you'd like. So go ahead and get on my calendar, hop on my calendar if you would like to do that. And I'll put a link for that. And let's get your routines going really well. And let's also get you all on the same page as much as possible about what your limits are and your expectations, your rules. Like, when do you step in? When do you let it kind of fly? If that's not organized, it adds a whole other layer of stress where you're kind of in this, how are we going to respond to this? More often than you need to be. So that would be two low-hanging fruit, like, things for busy parents, that if you don't feel like you already have clarity and you're already in a rhythm, those are the first 2 months of my program, my year-long program. And we do it twice a year, January, February, and then again July, August, and then again January, February, and then July, August, because these things also shift as the kids grow up. But those are the two spots I would have you looking at. And the reason why you need to map it out even more when you have siblings is that you're going to have different answers to the same question of, like, what does the morning routine look like? Different for 15 months and 6.5. Last but not least, be tune into the fact that you're actually pretty lucky. There's 2 of you. I know full time working solo moms with 2 kids, and they are outnumbered. So really take advantage of, like, kind of splitting the labor and the tasks, and as much as possible, like, be consistent for weeks at a time and then revamp it. Like, I wouldn't be negotiating every single step of every day. So if you read the books and he tucks them in, if he does the bath and you do the kitchen cleanup, like, whatever it needs to look like. It's funny, I was just with one of my clients who's here right now, and that's an example from your household. They've done a really good job of kind of clarifying who does what role in the evenings, and have refined it over time. So that's really great. Kirsten, there's an emoji that didn't come through, but there's something here, which I'm imagining you're responding to what I just said. Oh, it's a heart. Yeah. So Kirsten's here on Zoom and is feeling for you, Kerri, and what you and your husband are up against. And Kirsten, I'm sure you'd encourage them to go ahead and chat with me, or like consider these ideas, because of how much change is possible in a short amount of time, which you've had a chance to experience. So yeah, great. Okay, so next question, and then Kerri, let us know if you have follow-up comments or questions. This is for Rebecca, Ray, Keenan, and Carina D-C, both members of our group. Just finding you in the group right now. But the question is, can you offer advice for dealing with defiance and setting limits effectively? So we just touched on that, and that's why I was saving it for this question, is I like to go a little deeper on it with your question. And then Carina D-C, I know you had a very similar question, so I put these two together, which is, let me just make sure I've got the right one. Oh, it doesn't really show me. Okay, I'll have to look that up later. Carina, we'll tag you later. So one thing that I can say is that you'll want to get together with your other caregiver and do what I just mentioned for Kerri, which is, walk through what the limits, expectations are and see if there's any discrepancies between you and the other caregivers, if any. Also within yourself, you're like, well, it's kind of okay that they eat with their hands, but I'd really like them to start using utensils. I'm really not sure if I should go forward with this or not. Like when I should, how strict I should be about this, right? So you're going to want to go through, and one of the easiest inventories I say is anything that has to do with health and safety, address those first, because we tend to be the most triggered when health and safety is in any way at risk. And that emotion that floods us can flip our lids, and then we're no longer able to think it through in the moment. So these are great ones to have some pre-gaming around. So anything that has to do with health and safety for your little ones, go ahead and make a list of those expectations and walk through and see if there's any that are not very clear. It's really helpful to do this with a group or with a thought partner or with a coach, but that's where I'd start you. And in terms of a little one being very strong-willed, not sure what to do I have helpful tips? Yes. So a strong-willed child is going to be looking for opportunities to get into power struggles with you. And so there's a bit of choose your battles going on here. And I know it's something that's been said before, but I want to refine this a little bit. So when you're choosing your battles, you are thinking about that priority of health and safety first and wanting to get consistent with that. But there's also a way that you can make it less of a battle to begin with. And the first thing you can do is when they say no, or when they just flat out refuse, you can reflect back to them what you're seeing. Oh, it looks like you really don't want to do that right now, and say what it is. And you can even point at it, pick it up, touch it, move over there, do something that's physical that they can see. Because if it's a little one, that means that they're probably only taking in like 20% of what's salient information is verbal, auditory. Generally, we're so visual. So I would move your body, like they're sensitive to movement and visual cues. So I would be moving your body and saying the words, like get down at their level, pick up the thing, touch the thing, point at the thing, or even like mirror them a little bit. I'm like, I really don't want to go right now, show them that you are connecting with them. And that's kind of getting into the connect before correct. Now, if you connect before you correct in that way with a little one who's strong-willed, you give a little space for their no without reacting to it. Sometimes it's enough to diffuse it and shift from no to right. I don't want to, which is subtle, but it's important. Because then you can start to get into a conversation where you're their thought partner rather than their oppositional force that they're trying to push against. Okay. I do a lot of agreeing, even when I don't ultimately agree, and it's not manipulative because I do agree with that they are communicating a message. Oh, I see. Yes, you're trying to tell me this. Got it. There's the agreement. Oh, I wish I could give you blank right now. Or if only we could have a magic wand and could make that thing appear again. Kind of get on their side about it, and whatever emotion you're kind of sensing, you don't have to get them to agree that they're mad. You can just say, that sounds frustrating. Right? You don't have to say, you look mad, because don't tell me how I feel. Defiant kids tend to feel that way, tend to be that way. And if there's any movement towards like them softening their position or agreeing, you can even give them a message like, I'm here to help. I'm here to help. Yeah. Just a little reassuring, because they're flaring. They're flaring with pushback, and it's almost automatic. No, I don't want to, right? Throw themselves on the floor, lay there in tantrum, right? All kinds of things. So if you can get in their world a bit, let them know that you're there, you agree with helping them. Maybe you don't agree with them, you don't agree with their message, but you agree that they have a message and that you're hearing it. That can go a long way. The other thing is, again, be really clear about the things you're going to follow through on. If you wobble a lot on the health and safety ones, they will test it till the end of time, I swear. So there is a special way to follow through on that, which I'm going to get to in another question. So keep listening, okay? All right. So here's a 7-year-old that is struggling with emotional regulation. Annette is sharing with us. I'm going to tag this in here as well. So this is for Annette. Annette, you are letting us know this because you'd like to improve your communication and help with this issue. And often it is a communication issue, but I feel like mostly because it's challenging to know where to begin. And that's what you said, right? You're not sure where to begin. I might have to come back and retag you, Annette. So we'll see. We'll get you timestamped into this as well. So Annette wants to know what she can do. So a 7-year-old, like the 6.5-year-old that Kerri has in her household, can get their lid back on, and then you can have a reasonable conversation with them that can have many layers, like tactical layer of what are we gonna do next time this happens? Can we practice that tool or strategy? A sort of reflective layer, like, well, what do you think was going on that was so upsetting? That, like, what does this mean to you? Is there something that you need me to hear or understand about the situation? And then there's also a layer of like building the relationship and building trust that you are someone they can bring hard things to. So struggling with emotional regulation is a very exhausting state to be in. So your kid is tired and it's a lot of work. And it's so important that we help the kids that are struggling with emotional regulation so that they do get nervous system breaks. They get these brain breaks between their flares, and that they do feel equipped and can identify as someone who knows what to do when their feelings come up. So I've been studying a bit Lisa D'Amour's work, and she mostly focuses on teenage girls, but I really like her perspective on emotions, specifically intense emotions. So this is for highly sensitive kids, toddlers, and teens in particular. They are wired and built to have big emotions. That's just the thing. Now, where we want to guide them towards isn't the absence of emotion, or what we call negative emotions, sadness, fear, anger. What we want them to do is to help them have tools to cope. And we want to help them have like a response that's proportionate to the reality of things. Because a lot of times little kids are still like, they'll have an impression and then they'll make an interpretation from like sort of their database of perception. And it may not be accurate, their assessment of it, right? So oftentimes we're helping ground them in reality of like what is true, and updating their perceptions. But then because of their limited life experience, we're going to be doing things like accepting their big emotions because they don't have that perception yet. So what that might look like is they spill a bowl of cereal and it's a big mess. You ask them to clean it up, and now they're so upset that they're not sitting at the table with everyone else. Even though it completely makes sense that you'd have them clean up their mess before people step on it, before they track it all over the house, before it gets sticky or whatever. You have like good rationale. But once they've decided that this is unfair, this is like they're not getting what they want and you're the cause of it, they can launch into a tantrum, right? And so sometimes you just have to accept it. You go, oh, you're mad because you want something and I'm not giving it to you. You want to be at the table and I'm saying you can't be at the table right now. Did I get that right? Yeah. Oh, that is frustrating. So we might start emotion coaching with that piece, something that makes sense about the emotion, reflect it back, and then ask them, how would you like to help clean up the cereal? Right. And give them a way that they can do it that is maybe even just the first step. So we call this scaffolding in my world. What is the first step to cleaning up? It might be like, buddy, I don't need you to do much. You can come right back to the table, but can you go grab the broom? Can you go grab a paper towel? Just get them started. And with a 7-year-old, you can have them do that. And then sometimes if they just do one action, you can accept it for now. And then next time, and let them know next time I'll have you help me with the next part too, So there's ways to kind of build in some learning along the way and kind of scale our efforts based on what we're seeing they can handle. And over time with the 7-year-old, we're updating that perception database. So last time when you spill, or like, yesterday when you spilled that big mess, what happened? Oh, well, I knocked over my cereal and I was mad and I was sad. And I was like, okay, right. You were upset about it. Got it. Do you remember how the cleanup happened? Well, I went and got a paper towel. That's right. You did. I was so happy for the help. And now I know that, and I know though, that I did the rest, right? Like I picked up all the cereal and I went and got more paper towels and then I got something to wipe the floor with. And that happened too, right? Does that seem fair? 7-year-old, you can definitely bring in fairness. Does that seem fair that I had to clean up so much of your mess? No. Okay, this is with lid on, right? No. Okay, so what might we do differently next time? And then you can plan out a little mini plan for next time. Next time I'll leave the table and help. And then you can go in that other layer of like, so what was going on? Why didn't you want to leave the table? And this is where some problem solving can come in. Well, my cousin was in the middle of a story and I didn't want to miss any of it. Oh, got it. But you were too upset to tell me then, huh? Yeah, my lid was too far off. Okay. You can see where this is going. In the future, what about trying to see if there's a way that your cousin could pause the story and you can still hear it, or we could like record it and you could listen to it later, something like that. Do you think we could try something different? Sure. Yeah, we could try something different. And then they're like, I know, we could get your phone and use the voice memo app like we did for those birds or whatever, right? And then next thing you know, you're on the same side trying to solve the problem. But if you just jump into advice giving mode and it's with a dysregulated 7-year-old, they don't really like it in the moment too, because they can't quite go there with you. They need some time to process through their emotion, put their lid back on, have that validated, admit that they maybe could have done more, and also build off of what they did right. Okay, so hopefully it's just a little roadmap for you, Annette. But that's just one example. I hope that it helped bring some concrete like ideas to your mind. We love to hear what you think after you have a chance to listen to this. So this next one is for Liz, who also has a 7-year-old, 7.5 actually. I love when parents throw in the halves and the quarters, because we all know that half a year is a big deal. It could be like 20% of the kid's life, or 15, which is no small amount of time. So I appreciate that. So this one's for Liz, who also has, 7.5-year-old. Says that they're experiencing some problems with their child at school. He's not listening or following directions. Okay. He causes distractions or makes noise. He could possibly be using this as a coping mechanism, but I'm feeling lost. Can you offer any guidance? Nice, Liz. I know there are people in the group that can really relate to this, so I'm glad you brought this up. How many of you also have a really active kid in your life? And I want to welcome Joan on Zoom. Glad you're here, Joan. I saw you a minute ago, but I was on a roll, so I'm just taking a moment to welcome you in. How many of you also have an active kid who sometimes has their own little kind of, like they say, march to the beat of their own drum? They have their own sort of spontaneous internal activity that doesn't necessarily match the expectations of the environment. Yeah. So this is natural. Kids have varying amounts of spontaneous internal activity. Some kids more than others, and some kids later in life than others. Some never grow out of it. It's something that's just a part of them. They are very generative when it comes to ideas. They like to move their bodies. If they're in tune with something, the brainstorming session could be incredible. They'll come up with these incredible, but sometimes outlandish ideas related to their subject of interest. So if you've got one of these kids who's really sparked, they have a lot that they bring to the table, but they also have a challenging time aligning with expectations, you've got to find a way to work with it. And so one of the more important things you can do, and especially because you're mentioning causing distraction and making noise, is make sure, Liz, that your child, excuse me, is getting enough outlets for movement and enough sensory input in order for their nervous system to feel satisfied. It's almost like, when you feel satiated, when you've eaten enough, you're going to want to make sure that your child is satiated in the sensorial diet, like what they take in sensorially, and also that they are not being also flooded and overwhelmed by the amount of sort of input coming in. So there might be some sensitivities here to explore, Liz, and I would even maybe talk to your pediatrician about possibly doing an OT, occupational therapy evaluation, just to see and to see what's available in your school district too, and within your local in your local resources. And the reason I say that is because sometimes we can get to the bottom of things quickly and we learn what the kids need. Like I've seen children do incredibly well with just adding some way outlet for their movement. And depending on what kind of movement they tend to do, like even putting one of those like rubber band, like thick TheraBand things around the feet of the two front feet of their chair that they can like use as a foot fidget, helps them like it's kind of solves the kind of bouncing knee, foot tapping kind of thing, and can even minimize verbalizations and things like that. I'd also be asking if the classroom setup is, allowing for enough physical movement and conversation. If the teaching style is sit and listen, there may be a mismatch, and you may want to explore what can be done to bring in more options for a child who maybe likes to be up on his feet and moving around and in conversation and doesn't do well with a very low level of stimulation where it's mostly the expectation is sitting and listening. So I would need to know more about your school environment to be able to give you pointed advice about like what you might be requesting in terms of your first go at working with the teacher and the staff there. So let me know, Liz, I would really recommend you hop on my calendar for the complimentary session. And then we can talk it through even more. But hopefully I've given you a few ideas that you can roll forward with. The other thing is that you can do a lot more previewing of the expectations. And again, I would get very somatic and physical about it, like have him show you what his like what it looks like to be at a math lesson, have him show you what it's like to be at a language lesson with his body, like pretend, like role play through, get the materials, things like that. And then start to problem solve, like what are some things he could do with his body or with his voice during those times. And possibly you're right, building in coping strategies. So it's not just diversion of that energy, but also how to cope with the fact that he is in that situation to begin with, where he wants to do something different than what's happening. And then I would be getting really curious about what techniques the teachers and staffs are using when he's not listening, right? What does that mean? Not following directions. Is he turning away? Is he shutting down? Is he doing the opposite? Is he yelling and running around the room? Like, what does it look like to not listen in his case? There could be some really important clues built in that. Okay. So I would be having those conversations and getting more specifics, because oftentimes, I've done a lot of consulting in schools, and I've trained a lot of teachers in the classroom and through like national and international conferences. And a lot of times the adults mistakenly focus on fixing the kids' behavior instead of getting curious about their approach and how the environment is influencing the behavior. And so I would try and get curious about that with his classroom teachers. Does that make sense? So let us know what your thoughts are on that one, Liz. So glad that you asked that question. Next up is Rayanne Paulson. Rayanne's asking, getting my kids 7 and 11 off technology. Well, we know this one, particularly around bedtime, is something that causes strife in our family. How do I set boundaries and put this issue to rest? Well, we have to just acknowledge that kids are using screens, sometimes very appropriately, sometimes inappropriately or disproportionately as coping tools. And so getting into near bedtime, getting into screens is often related to wanting to avoid a difficult feeling that's come up and they don't want to deal with it from the day. So a little bit of escaping in there. Another is to sort of check out because they're actually very tired. And so they're doing a lot of passive screen time. And then last, it could be like, especially for your 11-year-old, this sense of like not wanting to let go of the day. And they want to push into more and more and more time, gaming time, particularly if they're playing with peers on an online platform. So you have to be kind of tuned into like which version of difficulty your child is having about separating from technology during, during those late hours. That will give you clues about how to start moving things towards less screen time in the evenings and having a strict cutoff time. If I were to tell you, just go pick a strict cutoff time, you'll probably roll your eyes because you probably tried that already. And one of the reasons why it's really hard to stick with that is because oftentimes this device time is meeting a need. And until you have something else to meet that need, it's almost like you tell a hungry kid not to eat cookies, but there's nothing else to eat in the cupboard. It's like, well, I'm probably going to fight for the cookie, right? But if you tell them, yeah, no cookies, but we have delicious fruit and a smoothie and, your favorite like savory snack, now we're talking. Like we have something that we can move towards rather than just making this thing that they want wrong, right? And so I have set up like things like reward charts for putting away the technology peacefully, or like, at least with a neutral tone, listening, excuse me, when asked to put those devices away. That can help in the short term, but I really caution you on like skipping the step of finding out what need it's meeting. So get curious about that and really help them think about what other activities they can be doing. I've had at least 30 clients in the last year working on this exact thing. And they found that if given no other option, because like you could also stage the Wi-Fi turning off or like the batteries dying in a device or something. Given no other option, kids do find something else to do, and they do tend to gravitate towards something that's going to meet their needs. So I would also be watching, like in circumstances where the thing dies or, the Wi-Fi turns off or, there's only one device and it's your phone and you're using it. What are the kids doing when it's not available? Excuse me. That'll give you clues not only on what their goal is, but on some alternative activities that you can expand on. So they tend to get out art supplies, maybe in that 1 week where you're going to be like stricter about the deadline of screens off, like a good 2 hours before bedtime or at least an hour, is what I would recommend for kids in that age range, at least an hour. I mean, it's good for all of us. Kids under 6 and under, maybe like very little screen time in the evenings, but then you're going to want to push to more like 2 hours. So we're talking about like early evening only. And the reason why is because of the kind of brain activity that it stimulates. It can really be hard for kids to wind down and get quality sleep. So you're doing it for like a scientific reason, not just because you want your kids off the screens, right? For other reasons, for like just, we don't want them to only be on screens. So you'll start to see if you take it away, like you can build off of what they spontaneously do instead. And you can start to think about, what does our wind down routine look like? Because oftentimes kids are reaching for the screen time late at night because they don't have a wind down routine that has been consistent and that everybody's like in agreement about and sticks to. So yeah, maybe save, like I was saying, like if it's art supplies, like, yeah, maybe save like some really awesome liquid watercolors and like a beautiful, like new pad of watercolor paper and like a really cool brush that's like sparkly or something. I'm just making this up, but like really go for it during that week that you're going to try and transition them to a stricter screens off week. And also be available. Because one of the things that we are patterned into, whether we like it or not, whether we're willing to admit it at first, and this is what my clients said, is like, I didn't even realize how much I was leaning on their screen time to then get things done for me, to get things done in the evening. And that part of why it kept happening, even though I didn't want it to, is because I was also dependent on their attention being somewhere else. And so in the first 1 to 2, even 3 weeks that you're transitioning to a new hard deadline, you kind of need to set aside other things and give them your full attention. And that's hard, I know, but worth it, because 2 to 3 weeks of painful, maybe turning into maybe like kind of sweet time for all the months and years ahead that you will maybe have less and less of this screen time struggle is so worth it. So look at your calendar, be clear about when you will be willing to go for it, right? And really commit. They'll feel if you're not committed. So make sure you're really ready to do it cancel your social plans those 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, and maybe start with just weeknights, so that you're not battling it on the weekends. And use the excuse of the new school year. I would capitalize on things like that. It really does work. You can say, now you're in X grade. That's why we're doing it this way, right? Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that's helpful to you, Rayanne. Let us know what stood out to you. Anybody here that's on the call that would like to report back some takeaways, if they're taking notes, if they're wanting to share back, we always love that. And so do the people who are asking these questions. So please go ahead and drop them in the comments or the chat. Anything that stood out to you so far? All right, we've got a couple more to go before we round out our time here. So this is Jen D-C. She says, I'm really in need of some coping strategy when it comes to helping my kids with their anxiety in healthy ways. I save this as a more specific question versus just the emotional regulation question. Anxiety has its own special sort of flavor. Anxiety is often paired with worry. And worry, it turns out, is an almost entirely like upper level cognitive function. It is a pattern of thinking, and that's good news, because the fear behind it is something we need to address with coping tools, which we'll get to in a moment. But if you're seeing worry and rumination, and it seems to be making, instead of alleviating your child's emotional state, it's exacerbating their state, you can do something about it and basically help them notice that they're ruminating. And at 7, especially 11, notice that they're ruminating and take a break from that. Change the subject, go do something that takes their mind off of it, maybe something physical, they get into their bodies. Like I had this client with a 10-year-old who really wanted to start getting some exercise, and it was really cute. She was like interested in working out in the garage because they put like a stationary bike in there and a treadmill and a TV. So she thought, I'll watch and I'll move my body. But she was so scared of the spiders in there. And what they realized was that, by scaffolding towards her comfort, once she got her mind moving, or her mind and her body moving, she was fine. She wouldn't think about the spiders anymore. But for a little while, she would put her mind on it, and she would like even feed it, like, right? So she'd start visualizing big spiders and hairy spiders and spiders jumping on her. And like, it made it worse. So her mom just told her, like, you actually have a choice over where your mind focuses, and you can focus your mind on something else, but I'll help you get into the garage and get going, and then get you focused on something else. And then, as you've seen before, it really helps. And sure enough, she got over her fear in about 3 weeks. Yeah, she can easily go into the garage now. Every now and then she feels spooky about it. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't love spiders. And if one surprises me, I still get spooked. But I can walk up to a spider and not, like shake down into my boots now, because I updated my perception of it. And also I don't put my mind into what it's going to feel like if it crawls on me. Like, I just don't let my mind go there. I say, no, we don't need to go there. We don't need to do that. Or I'll walk away and just like focus on the sunshine and the leaves and move on from the spider, right? Like, okay, that experience is over. So that's the first part. The second half I want to say about anxiety, folks, is that it is really challenging for the nervous system to feel safe around something that it's had a scary experience around. We're hardwired to then connect these dots in our brain that say, when I'm in the presence of this thing or this person or this situation, I hear these words, then I need to go into fight or flight. And so this can be dogs. I've helped families with a child with horrible dog fears, with swimming, getting into the water, letting their head get wet, with being at school alone, like without their parent, because they haven't really acclimated to school yet. There's all these ways that anxiety can show up in children. So what we know about anxiety is that exposure events tend to work as long as they don't cause a level of upset that's beyond your child's ability to cope. So when it comes to helping your kids deal with their anxiety in healthy ways, we have to think about it as almost like a dosage of exposure. And we don't want to override their system to the point where they are in overwhelm and they can't recover on their own, or with a little bit of help. Okay. So what does exposure events look like? So for example, with one client, I worked with them and their son was scared of the dogs. That's what we were talking about. And so we had started with being in the same space as a dog that's 50 feet away on a leash at a park, right? And then they had a plan for like, he'd come over to his dad and stand right by him instead of climbing up him and screaming, right? So this was like his first scaffold. Next, and only for like 20 minutes, and then they leave the park. And he would reinforce, oh, okay, how did that go? Were you safe? How did you know, right? Well, how was that dog? Try to update their story on it, because it takes some time to eliminate these really strong connections between the stimulus and the fear response. It takes multiple exposures, and if you just throw them straight into it and the fear response comes up again, it almost reinforces it. So that's why we have to take it in dosages or stages. Next, so it's be in the park 50 feet away, be in the park 10 feet away, hang out with a dog you're familiar with that we know is very friendly, and touch the dog. Watch a dog out the window that you know in your yard for a good long time, and watch what it does, and just notice, what do dogs do, and kind of get curious about dogs as something that's not threatening, but is like something we could focus on instead. And then eventually work up to walking a dog with a family member. And this child went from being in the little league situation, and a dog would show up in the park and he would run to his dad, climb up him and scream, to staying in the game, seeing a dog and kind of just nodding and taking a little breath. And then if the dog would approach him, he would go find his dad, but stand right next to him instead of climbing him and screaming. Did that for a season, and now he's pretty much over his fear of dogs. It's possible. Now, if you do this kind of level of intervention and you don't see any improvement, and it keeps your kid up at night, they're losing sleep, they're not eating, they're consistently overwhelmed with emotion, you want to contact your pediatrician and even look at maybe doing a more therapeutic approach, working with the therapist, okay? Because we don't want our kids in that state for too long, especially if it's been going on for 3 weeks or more at that level of intensity. Go get some support. I really recommend that. But you can try this first, okay? We've had great success with it. All right, so last but not least, we have a question from Christy Althorpe. So Christy is asking about her young one who's about to be a teen. 12-year-old will be transitioning into teenhood soon, and I'm having a hard time letting go. Oh, Christy, I know how you feel. Yeah, my stepkids are now in their 20s, and it's just hard to see them like get out of the cute phase, but they're still cute. I always say, like, even my students, when I see them in the future, as they're getting older and stuff, they always look the same, right? In the area of the sunglasses. Like, if you could just see them right here, that's like their baby's still in there. The little toddler preschooler still in there. But let's talk about how you could let go. And this is where I'd love to turn it over to like the community, like who have either done it or are anticipating having to do it. What did maybe something your parent did to help with this? And Christy, I'm not able to tag you, but we'll work on that once the recording's up. So I think the main thing is I like to envision, and my family's to envision the strong, capable, incredible young adult that they're turning into. And like, think of them, launching them into the world, like with all these great qualities and characteristics, and kind of previewing how proud you're going to feel when they do things like, I don't know, become a really good friend, possibly be a really good partner or parent, contribute to the organizations that they care about, whether that's for work or not, continue to learn and grow and turn it into a really strong adult, in their 20s, finding their independence. When I visualize that, it's sad, but it also helps me to settle down, because I feel like the pride sort of overrides the anticipated sadness. So there's that, like you can do some visualization exercises of really visualizing your child at that age. The other thing at those ages, right? Like launching, like maybe driving for the first time, um, applying for schools or anticipating what's happening after high school, leaving that high school bubble and seeing what the real world's all about, maybe going on some kind of trip or something where they get to explore another culture, another environment, all the experiences they're going to get to have when they're independent. So that's one way. Another thing you can really think about is like, what is life going to be like once you're empty nesting and you have more time, more of your time back, where like you're still going to be thinking about you never stop thinking about your kids. But you're going to have less of that time commitment. And what are you looking forward to kind of pursuing with that time, whether it's just more spaciousness in your calendar or something like a hobby or a goal or a career or something that you've wanted to give more time and attention to. And I have a hot tip. This is my pro tip on this one. Whatever that vision is, do 10% of it now and see if you can even grow to 20, 30, 40, 50%. And so I've seen some families do this. I have a couple of alumni clients in particular that have come to mind, where all throughout the year, while they were working on parent coaching, while they were, figuring out the school year with their kids and working through tricky, demanding behaviors and getting the siblings to get along better and getting the routines to run smoothly, amongst all of that, both of them had really big aspirations for their personal growth. And one in particular was, worked up to competing nationally in jiu-jitsu, which was, really, I think it was Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And figured that out. Right. So I think sometimes part of what we have a hard time letting go of is the part of our identity that we have a hard time letting go of, first of all, doesn't have to be gone. It just gets to transform. Now we're an adult, or now we're a parent of an adult child or a teenager and an adult child, right? So we're still a parent. And there might be some part of you that has just been so all consumed with parenting that now needs to have its time in the sun, even if you just inch your way out into the sunshine. So starting with 10 to 20% of that vision. So let's say, one thing that came to mind when I did that visualization, Vanessa, is I want to finally get back to my music and, get a band going again, or like, take lessons and really finish what I started with my piano or whatever it might be. Well, there's nothing stopping you taking a few lessons now, right? Even if it's just on a Casio keyboard, and as a trade with someone in your community who would trade you for something else, right? Let it, or just like go online and get a tutorial and just play for a little while. I did this while I had my kids at home still. I wasn't able to commit to the full 1 year of piano lessons that I did once they left the house. But I just got like a little app and a little follow along thing on an iPad, and borrowed my kid's iPad. I put it up and I learned how to play one song. That was all I wanted, right? I just did that and it felt great. It nourished my soul and it made me feel more robust and more bolstered when my core identity piece shifted around how much time and energy I needed to commit to my kids, my stepkids, when they left. And then, and then I finally did do my 1 year of piano, but I was really glad that I sort of had that lined up for myself. So that's really helpful on your level. And then last but not least, get to know teenagers. Like, what is the deal with teenagers? Why are they so impressive? I mean, their whole brains are reorganizing and rewiring like a toddler level of reorganizing. They're starting to look outward into the world and care about social causes outside of their home and outside of their immediate circles. They also are really learning about friendship and like how to navigate their emotions, because they're unavoidable at that age. You just have this really amazing opportunity to not only shape the adult your child is turning into, but get to know them. Like, what do they care about? What works for them when they're upset? Like, how do they manage their stress? Who are their friends and why? Like, what do they enjoy about their friends? What music are they into? What art are they into? What social causes are they into? Like, what fashion are they into? What kinds of activities they like to do with their buddies, get to know your teen and just like really enjoy the process of the unfolding of adulthood. It's incredible. And if you need support around it, hit up someone like me. Maybe check out some of Lisa D'Amour's work on emotional lives of teenagers. I'm actually doing a little mini book club with a few clients who have teens. We're just casually reading through it, but getting a ton out of it. That book, The Emotional Lives of Teenagers. So maybe check that out to kind of get ready for all the amazing times ahead. Christy, I hope that was helpful. So that was our last question of our Ask Me Anything. I'm so happy that those of you who were able to make it are here and were able to enjoy this conversation. If you're listening to the replay, you can always drop the word replay in the comments or in the chat. We'd love that, just to see that you were here. Give us a little shout out, a little hello, something that stood out to you. And there's a special kind of thing going on that I wouldn't mind plugging, because it's the first time it's happened. I guess it's me. I was nominated for Best of El Cerrito, which is the city I live in just north of Berkeley and Albany and Oakland. So if you know where those places are, I was just nominated for Best Parenting Coach, Best Parenting and Family Coach category. So if you wouldn't mind checking this out, I will drop a link to the post that I put up that has the link to vote, and I'll also put the link to vote in this post as well on this video. And if you wouldn't mind just going in, and if you feel called to vote for me in this category, it would be really fun to see that support coming through. So I do appreciate it if you do. No pressure though, of course. Great to see each and every one of you. Hope that we have more opportunities to connect in the future. Lots of love to each and every one of you. And we are working towards becoming the calm, empowered parents that we were meant to be. And in the process, we will be raising happy, confident, and resilient kids in lifelong relationships built on mutual respect, trust, appreciation, and love. And there's really, at the end of the day, nothing better than that. So thank you for doing the work, for showing up, and let others know that this is possible for them too. Many of you found this space because someone shared it with you. So don't be shy to invite people into our group, or just share a post and see where that takes people. All right, lots of love to each and every one of you. Take care for now. And that concludes our Ask Me Anything for the Monday Mindset Moment. Okay, bye for now.